This is Aliens and Artists, part 1 of our conversation with Sebastiano De Filippi. I'm Stuart Davis. Sebastiano is an Italian-Argentine music director, orchestral conductor, and author. He has never spoken publicly about this experience he'll be sharing. It's a riveting multi-witness event that lasted for hours with quite the intense conclusion. We're so grateful he's recounting it here for the first time, and so without further delay, here it is.
Well, I'll try first of all to give you a little bit of background history here, because we are talking about a particular place which is not very well known outside Argentina, at least not up until now, which is a particular mountain in the state of Cordoba, which is quite in the center of Argentina, of the country. It is not a very high mountain, actually, but it is the highest in that particular range of mountains in Cordoba, which is named Uritorco, Mount Uritorco. It's a place with a long history of strange tales and experiences and mythology. It's a kind of Mount Shasta for Argentina, if you get my meaning. But it's also a combination of Mount Shasta meeting Skinwalker Ranch plus Marfa Lights plus Roswell, perhaps, or Dulce. So it's a kind of classical hotspot down here in South America. I think this is something which is not new. Perhaps it's something that was also, in a way, known by the people who inhabited the place before the Spanish conquest. We don't have a proof of that, but I think it's quite probable. In this particular place and the city, it's a town, small town, touristic town, which is nearby the Uritorco, is named Capilla del Monte, which means Chapel of the Mount. So it's a religious name. And for a number of reasons, I got to know the place and its surroundings very early on, when I was a teenager, or a pre-teenager, I would say, a small kid, because of family reasons. You know, my maternal grandmother had remarried to a gentleman who was living nearby. So, to make a long story short, I spent many a summer in her house near this particular area. And I got to know the stories around Mount Uritorco very, very early on. So it became a bit of an obsession, and I spent almost only considering my adult age, 27 years in field work, and also, of course, library work, but mostly field work in or around Mount Uritorco. So that came to fruition, so to speak, with my writing and publishing 3 books about all these phenomena in this hot spot. Books which exist in both Spanish and Italian, and were published in Argentina, in Chile, in Spain, and of course in Italy. Not yet in English. That's the bad news for any interested listener. Not yet. I'm hopeful. In a way, I've dealt in writing with this phenomena in this hotspot from, I wouldn't say skeptical, but certainly rational way, serious way, proof-minded way, because as usually in this kind of cases and phenomenology, there are so many people which are extremely gullible and in need of easy answers, of almost automatic explanations. And there are also a lot of people profiting from this. from our human weakness. So this kind of South American Roswell has become a kind of, Jerusalem temple in which we would need a couple of Jesus to just send the merchants out. I think in this case, as in many others, the real phenomena gets contaminated and sometimes even obscured, totally obscured, by this kind of, once again, dishonest people taking advantage of persons who are looking for something, whether phenomenon or in a spiritual quest, So in my 3 books, I mostly deal with these dishonest and or gullible people and the thing that they produced. Because when the Uritorco and Capilla del Monte get into newspapers and radio shows and TV shows, it's usually for the wrong reasons. And I'm sure you understand what I mean. All kinds of conjurers and so-called self-appointed gurus, very cheap people taking advantage in terms of money, but also power over many persons who are traveling to this place in search of a kind of contact, either with ET beings or spiritual beings, or just to connect with themselves or with Mother Earth, perhaps. And all this is being taken advantage of in a very, very extreme, rude, very unpleasant way. So as an author, I try to write from the social sciences and from the humanities point of view, and almost as a journalist, since as you well know, I'm essentially a musician and musicologist, but I also have this college background in social sciences and humanities. So it is rather natural for me to look at this phenomenon in a very dispassionate way and just try to, bring a little bit of seriousness and a little bit of facts and light in a very shadowy place, in which, for instance, most of the phenomena which are reported and in the media are non-existent, are the non-existent ones. And perhaps the real phenomena, they don't get reported at all. So it's a kind of dichotomy I live with, in the sense that in public, I usually wear this hat in which I'm a kind of, once again, I wouldn't say skeptic, but very rational and very science-conscious person when dealing with this kind of phenomena. But on the other side, as a person, as an individual, I had the opportunity to witness, to see things which are really not easily explainable. Very, very, very strange, very weird phenomena. So once again, I have this like 2 hats. When I encounter a professional skeptic, I usually draw my personal experiencer weapon and shoot him and shoot at him with it. And when I have in front of me a not very well informed person and a very gullible person, I usually put on my scientist hat and try to rationalize. So it's a kind of double life I live. So once again, I can try to tell you whatever you are interested in from both sides of the bridge, from the side of the materialistic person who is really trying to identify lies, deceits, hoaxes, fraud. And indeed, I succeeded in that. I was able to really debunk very serious claims and to show some people for what they really are. And on the other side, I'm the first person to to be able to tell you that something very weird is going on that particular hotspot.
That's beautiful, and I completely accord with the complementarity of what might superficially seem like a paradox or a disparity. On one hand, advocacy for the rational, healthy, science, discernment. On the other hand, advocacy for experiencers, and the fact that something fundamentally inexplicable is afoot. I love how these are coupled in your life, and the refusal on your part to collapse the enigma to one or the other end of the spectrum. Your experience is one of the more unique and remarkable I've heard, and I'll hand the talking stick back to you to relate it in your own terms.
Sure, I can try anyway. It was more or less a 4-hour-long experience, so it's kind of difficult to try to sum it up into, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, but I will try. This happened if I recall right, in January 2014. So it's already a while ago. You have to know that January in Argentina is in the middle of the summer holidays and very hot. And it's the touristic season in this place, in Capilla del Monte, for people who like to go to the mountain instead of going to, the sea or whatever. So I spent a whole week in a cabin nearby Capilla del Monte, very, very near to Mount Uritorco, with a friend and colleague of mine, a music teacher, and a good friend, who I have to say was not aware of almost anything about the phenomena, mythology, tales, stories about this place, which is very interesting in the light of what I'm going to tell you. Because at that point, I was well aware of, I was in the middle of a lifelong research process. So I was really into those kind of stories, but he wasn't. And that's very interesting because we had this 4-hour-long experience together. We saw and experienced the same things. But of course, each of us had his own background and his own knowledge or lack of knowledge about the stories circulating in the hotspot, so to speak. So, it was rather late after dinner, like 10 p.m. You have to be aware that in South America, it's very common to have dinner at 9:30. It's very common to really enjoy the first part of the night, especially in summer, of course, during the summer. So it's like 10 something past 10 p.m. and we were on this wooden deck at our cabin, which we were renting for the week, in which we had a small pool, and we were just talking, refreshing ourselves with the water and looking at the sky, and just normal conversation between two friends sharing a bit of summer holiday time together. At one point, we saw from the other side of the mountain a huge series of flashes, what we would say, no? Flash of silver light, like there was a giant on the other side of the mountain with a huge photo camera taking pictures. And as the result of that, we, from the other side, from the western side of the mountain in which we were located, we were seeing these huge flashes of light, silver light, but really huge. I never saw something like that. We never saw something like that before. And these huge flashes of silver light, of which we were aware of the upper part, let's say, the part that was visible when the mountain, when the mountain ended upwards, it also had a kind of rhythm and a kind of movement toward north. The Uritorco is a rather long mountain, and it's kind of physically developed from south to north, no? If you try to picture this in your mind. So we were in the western southern part of the mountain, so we could see those flashes of light like traveling northbound with, once again, a kind of a pulsating rhythm. So one flash, and then a second flash a little bit more to the north, and then a third flash even more to the north, and then a fourth flash, and like that for at least a dozen times, I think. Always traveling from south to north, that is, getting away from us in a way, and always on the opposite side of the mountain, of this long mountain. This was puzzling enough, as you can well imagine. We had, at that point, we didn't have smartphones. We did have a small digital camera. And we tried to take some pictures, and we did. The thing is, as any of us know, a flash doesn't stop in midair to be portrayed. It's just perhaps less than half a second. You see the flash and then it disappears. And then, of course, you have the next flash. So it was impossible to get it on camera. Impossible. The camera was not up to the speed needed to really portray one of those flashes. The thing is, this continue its travel northbound up until it was impossible to follow it. I mean, it became invisible because of the way the mountain is shaped and the place in which from which we were observing it. But then, just after a few minutes, and here, of course, we have a big question mark, because we don't know if it was the same phenomenon with different phases as the travel direction would indicate, or this was a second phenomenon, and there afterwards we had a third one. We don't know if it was the same one with three phases or three different phenomena. But the sure thing is it moved, there was a continuity of movement between these first huge silver flashes of light and what then became a small series of traveling red flashes of light from east, that is, from Mount Uritorco, to west, that is, going almost, I would say, cross country and away from the mountain range. So it became, or at least this was our impression, that was the same phenomenon, just changing the way it was acting, a series of small red concentrated flashes of lights going from east to west. And there were some hills, very small hills, who, let's say, we could see once again the upper part of these flashes, red flashes. But I would say we were seeing like 80% of it, since those hills were very low. We were able to see almost the full amount of light and flash. And I'm telling you this because the strange, very strange thing is these flashes of lights, the second kind of flashes, they were not behaving like normal flashes, in the sense that they developed into a very concrete shape, a kind of crown, if you want, with rounded with spikes, but with each spike rounded up like with a circle. The other day, a friend of mine said to me, like coronavirus? Yeah, something like that. Something like that, actually, yes. But it was really much before we knew about coronavirus. So these flashes, traveling flashes from east to west, small, red, and very concentrated, had this amazing quality. When they got to their maximum stage of development, they froze for a second or two in this perfectly geometrical shape of a kind of sun, or crown or whatever. I don't know what that was about, really. But to give you an idea, it was like a depiction of a sun, which a kid could do it in school. But once again, with those spikes, which ended up in a round way, like 6 or 7 footballs rounding up each spike. So this was extremely strange, very weird, very unsettling, much more than the huge flashes of light, actually. And this kept traveling from east through west. We also tried to capture this with our camera, and we did in a way, but what you can see in the pictures is just a tiny little spot of red light in the distance, which is nothing similar to what we were looking live. I mean, it's just, you see the pictures and you see, you can say that light could be anything. I mean, a car, a light from a house, anything. So it was impossible to capture in the camera what both of us were witnessing at the moment. Now the thing is, this series of flashes were traveling towards the national route, which goes from south to north. That is, it's in a parallel position in front of the Uritorco. So we were saying, this thing is going to hit the route. Since we are equipped with a 4x4 vehicle, we should try to get it. Go for it. Since we were not afraid, actually, at this point, because I would say the reason we were not afraid is because both series of lights were very far away, quite far away. It was not something that was, threatening us from a few footsteps. We are talking about no less than 10, 15, 20 kilometers. So we did. We got into the car. We drove out from the town, and we managed to get the national route and go northbound, trying to kind of intercept these flashes of red moving light. The thing is, when we reach more or less the spot in which we thought we were going to have this interception, we saw nothing, or almost nothing, just a kind of strange luminescence, but something very, very almost natural, like when you are in a night with a full moon, let's say, in the middle of not certainly not in a city, but in the middle of a mountain. Yeah. But what we did, out of intuition, kind of, was to turn left to the state route, which goes from west to east, intersects Uritorco, and goes through Uritorco to a valley which is called Ongamira. We did that, and as soon as we did that, we encountered, not very far away, actually, I would say like 20 meters away, The third manifestation of this phenomena, or a third phenomenon, if you prefer, we don't know, which was a kind of regularly shaped cloud, extremely regularly shaped. It was oval, which had a kind of activity inside it, like gas or liquid or some kind of energy moving around with alternating and mixing a kind of blue liquid with a kind of gray liquid with a kind of whitish liquid or gas or whatever. I mean, there was a lot of activity inside of this perfectly shaped cloud, so to speak, because it wasn't a cloud. I mean, it was not in the sky. It was something like 5 meters from the ground, from the root. So it was a very, I don't know if it was a solid object, but it was certainly an isolated presence, which was absolutely out of this world. We had never seen anything like that. Not in person, not in pictures, not in a drawing. And I of course, I have a lot of literature about this kind of phenomena, but I've never read about people encountering a kind of regularly shaped, multicolored sort of cloud. I would say not moving, apparently, just 5 meters from the ground, in the middle of nowhere, because this route is surrounded by nothing. I mean, just plants and a bit of woods, and of course the mountain, and there's nothing there. And this was the beginning of the most puzzling part of our experience, because we still not afraid. We decided to pursue it, to go in its direction, and we did that. And at a certain point, we discovered the thing was keeping the same amount of distance from us as we drove. I mean, so it kept like a 15 meters distance, no matter how fast or how slowly we were driving. It would adjust its position and its speed to be always this far away ahead of us. So we went on and on and on for, I don't know, no less than half an hour. Actually, up until we were almost to the point of crossing the Uritorco towards that valley of Ongamira, which we decided we were not going to do, because after 3 hours of observing these lights, and after 1 hour and a half of being on the car, we knew that we could not just, pursue lights up until 4 in the morning in the middle of a deserted valley with no cell signal, no phone signal, no towns, no houses. We would have run out of gas and be just stranded there up until the other day. I mean, the other morning, when some car would have passed through and just help us out. So we knew at that point we had to stop. We could stay at that very secluded place for a while, and actually we did. But then we knew we had to just turn back and go back to our cabin. So at this point, we stopped the car, we left it, and we approached a couple of steps. And the thing was there, just there, with all that internal colorful activity I was telling you about. So kind of 15 meters from us and kind of 5 meters from the ground. And we were just staring at it, and you could perhaps imagine or sense that it was staring at us. Well, this is when things got interesting because my friend, my friend just began to shout to it in anger, because he felt that after almost 3 hours of pursuit, he deserved to see more, to see better. And so he started to shout in a very unpolite manner to this kind of cloud, luminous cloud, by the way, and demanding that these people, so to speak, show themselves. And saying, you know, I'm not afraid of you, I'm a grown-up man. I think he said something like, in French you would say, I have big balls. So he was really angry and frustrated and was shouting at this thing. And I told him, you know, my friend, I wouldn't do that. Because perhaps, I don't know, perhaps you only saw Spielberg's movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and you think this is a kind of extraterrestrial ship manned by very sympathetic and friendly ETs, and that's fine. But the reality is we don't have a clue what this is about. We really don't know. We don't know anything about this we are here staring at. So we're in doubt, you know, use caution. I told him that, and he kind of understood and stopped his shouting and unpolite communication. He tried to, you know, activate the lights of the car and play some games with a electric torch we had. But no communication of that kind resulted. There was no response to our playing with lights. Now, the interesting thing is, after a few minutes of just being there and staring at it in complete silence, there were no people, no animals, no clouds, nothing, in the middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden, my friend, who was behaving in a rather natural, normal way up until then, he had a kind of panic attack, and he almost collapsed in panic. He was white. His face was white as a paper, and the little hair he had went up, and he got goosebumps, and he started to, you know, trembling uncontrollably, to shake, and began to tell me that we had to leave in a very agitated way. He probably had, you know, a heart ratio which was very much higher than normal, like palpitations. He was very, very, very upset, very afraid, very, very nervous. And he told me several times that we had to leave that place immediately. So I tried to calm him down, which was quite difficult. First of all, because he was in panic, and then because he didn't want to explain what had triggered his reaction. He told me, no, you will think I'm crazy. Of course, I told him, no, I won't think that of you. You can confide in me. There's no problem. Well, the thing is, he told me that he has just heard 4 chords sung by a chorus. He is a music teacher, mind you, again. So he knew exactly what he was talking about. I mean, he was also able to sing the upper voice of these 4 chords, once again sang by a chorus way in the distance. There's no need to clarify, or perhaps, yes, there was nothing around this place. Just to think that there was a chorus, a choir there singing, is just it's much more crazier than thinking about extraterrestrials and airships and spaceships. Now, the interesting thing is, he was the only one to hear this. I didn't hear a thing. First interesting point. Second interesting point. I knew for long experience in the field of many, many witnesses saying that when they went up to the mountain to do the rituals and the contact ceremonies of Angel Cristo Coglanis, they heard as something like a chorus singing in the distance. So this is extremely puzzling and interesting and meaningful, because this thing kind of scared my friend through something that was perceptible only to him. But then he wasn't aware of these stories of choral voices in the middle of nowhere, but I was aware of them. So with a single, I don't know how to put it, with just one small act, this thing got a kind of revenge on my friend because he was not polite. It demonstrated that it could feed him some auditory information without me knowing that. And third, and most important, this thing validated through a person who was not aware of these stories about choral voices. It validated to me those stories I knew. So that was a very powerful moment, an extremely powerful moment, because I realized, and I came to a conclusion, which is, by the way, the only conclusion I have up until today, because I don't know what that was, and I doubt I would ever know. But I do know, as I knew then, that this had volition, this had will, this had intelligence. I don't know if this thing was a subject, it was a being, I don't know. But if it was not something alive, it was controlled by something which was sentient and had volition and had intelligence and was communicating in a very, in a way, convoluted way. Almost, if you think about it, it was almost a mafia message, but very effective, extremely effective. It was very effective for my friend to be very afraid, and it was extremely useful for me to understand that this thing was intelligent and that this thing knew that I knew about the choral voices. And so this kind of mediated experience of my friend would be a kind of double confirmation, a double validation for me, and it was. This is spooky. It's really, I wouldn't say scary, but a bit spooky. Well, in the end, I didn't explain this to my friend at that point, because I knew he was already afraid. If I told him that I knew about the choral voices, he would have perhaps, I don't know, collapsed. So I didn't. I waited up until the next day to tell him about it. After a few minutes of further observation, mutual observation, I guess, then the last thing happened, which is that I felt a sudden current, a sudden charge of fear. In my case, it was not panic, it was not uncontrollable, perhaps because it was not, the intention of this thing was not so strong, perhaps also because I am a very, very cold-minded person when in danger. I was at least twice in my life 1 second away from dying, dying a rather violent death. I know from those two moments in my life that if I can keep, as I did, my cool when dying, almost dying, I can certainly keep my cool when something like this happens. So I was not in panic. There was nothing to trigger it. There was just like a shot of not AstraZeneca or Pfizer, but a shot of fear with no apparent reason. So I didn't panic, but I did understood the message. This thing was kind of telling me also, it's about time we end this lovely meeting. I had this is very personal, very subjective. I was under the impression that this thing was bored with us and a little bit disappointed. And since it was past midnight, we decided to call it a night. So we took up again our vehicle and we drove back an hour or so up until we reached our cabin. And so that was, I think this is the best way I can try to sum up this 4-hour experience. 4 hour, let's say, from the first flash, silver flash we saw, up until we abandoned this cloud and got back to the town. That would be it, I guess.
Questions. I have some. Beginning with the turn left where your trajectory switched from south to north over to east-west.
Yes, to west-east. From west to east.
Okay, yes, from west to east. And you felt that turn was intuitive. These years later, do you still feel that was random or intuitive, or possibly that the nature of this intelligence guided or directed that choice in any way?
It was absolutely rational, because the only way to somehow approach the lights, the flashes we had just saw, was to go east. And the only way to go east was to turn left at that point.
Mm-hmm.
With a vehicle, the only way to get to an approximate position in which the red flashes were showing themselves was to go that way. So it was quite logical. And that's why I was telling you that we don't know if it was 3 phenomena or just one phenomenon with 3 faces. But there was a logic in its movement. I mean, it began in the eastern part of the mountain, which is invisible for us. It was towards north, and then it turned towards west, and then it didn't reach apparently the route because we didn't see that, but we could turn east and try to approximate the place in which we last saw the last red flash. And that it was what we did. As simple as that.
This is conjecture, just asking you to speculate from the gut. Do you feel this was 3 distinct phenomena, or was there an organizing principle, 3 faces on one phenomenon, as you say?
Yeah, in my mind, it was the same phenomena. Or at least, it came from the same source.
And what was that ride home like? Did you speak? What became of this friendship?
It's a very interesting question, because I'm still very good friend to this person. Because, as you all know, with this strange phenomena, but also in life in general, each and everybody of us copes as he can. The way he has been taught, the way he has been raised, the way he has become through reading and life experiences. So my friend was, and this is it's really to be expected, was desperate to find an answer. an explanation. If a skeptical and rational one, that would be the ideal. And if not, someone to tell him it was ETs and UFOs. But he had this very human thing of wanting to get peace of mind by embracing an answer, an explanation, no matter which explanation of, and not caring really if the explanation is right or not. This is very human, and it affects all of us, and we see this each and every day of our life in all the fields of existence you can imagine. But that's not me. I'm extremely rational. Also in my metaphysical musings, I'm extremely rational. So, and I don't have a problem with uncertainty, with ignorance, and with not knowing. Actually, I'm almost, I would say, proud of being a big ignoramus, because I prefer not to know and tell people that I do not know and I do not understand, that just embrace easy solutions, easy explanations, easy theories, which at the end of the day, you cannot be sure they're right. Actually, most of the time you have not a hint of evidence or proof. Or so I prefer to say, look, I went through this. This is up to this day completely unexplainable. I may have my intuitions, ideas, personal ideas, but I would never impose them to other people because I don't have any kind of proof. I only have my intuition, and I check that if my intuition gives me something which has a certain internal coherence. If my intuition serves me with something with an idea which has a certain internal coherence, well, that's an interesting starting point. But once again, I won't embrace it like one embraces religion. I will never do that. So up to this point, up to this very day, I don't know. And actually, I'm coming to, as I keep studying and reading and doing research and investigating and talking with very interesting individuals about these kind of things, I'm coming to terms with a kind of belief that we are not built with the cognitive capacity to fully understand these things. We barely have what it takes to witness some of the things, which is, to me, if you allow me for a quick philosophical explore, I think this is the very nature of our species. We are in a very sad and ironic position, as in, we belong in the upper echelon of mammals. But we are the only ones to be able to theorize about things we don't know and don't understand. And we also are able to say, here it is something that I don't understand, which the other mammals, as far as we know, they cannot do this. But yet we have this advantage if compared to mammals, but we are not equipped enough to go further. We can only speculate and have a bit of a taste of this kind of alternative parallel reality. But we are in a middle ground. We lack what maybe an upper echelon, an upper realm of intelligent life may have. We don't have that. And then we have a little bit more than the superior mammals have. It's a very sad and ironic position. And we call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens. That is the hominid who knows and who knows that knows, which is, I think, a very precarious position. I wouldn't call myself sapiens sapiens. I would call myself Homo insipiens, the man that doesn't know, and perhaps even doesn't know that he doesn't know. So no, I really don't have. I can only tell what I saw, but I make no judgment of it because I don't have. The more I read, the less I understand. In a way. But that's also understanding up to a point, right? I mean, if you come slowly to the conclusion that you are not equipped, I don't mean as an individual, also as a species, you are not equipped to understand it really. Then, well, you have just to live with that experience and knowing that some of the other experiences you might hear of may be also very real, as of course many of them are not, which I also discovered in this 27 years of field research. But some of them are, like this one. Of course, I cannot prove it to anyone, and of course I don't care to. Actually, I don't usually tell this story at all, because I think one of the main features of this phenomena, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's one of its main features is that they do not like to be captured in sound recordings or pictures or film footage in a very clear way. They don't like that, or it doesn't like that. It usually doesn't happen. And I'm starting to believe it's something which has to be with the way the phenomenon works. One of the things I'm coming to believe about the phenomenon is this. It is always wearing a mask, and sometimes several masks. Actually, I'm reminded of Joseph Campbell's hero of 1,000 faces. Well, I think this phenomenon has 1,000 faces. Yeah. And we may provide most or perhaps all of those faces. I mean, it builds up its masks from what it finds inside of us. That is the idea I'm toying with lately, which perhaps is not very new, because as you go back to your library, you will find that someone like Jacques Vallée thinks something quite similar. Perhaps not exactly what I'm saying, but in the line of what I'm thinking.
Be sure to catch part 2 of our conversation with Sebastiano. How badass is this cat? His musical biography is longer than your double-jointed arm. He speaks English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, reads Russian, Hebrew, Latin, Greek. Check out his website by clicking the link in the show notes, and I will also put links to his books in there in case you are a polyglot who can read those in the languages they're printed in. How do you hear part 2? You become a patron or a plusser who receive a courtside box at Wimbledon. Yes, it's the Queen's box. For Minus listeners, the Queen's box is all locks. Patrons and plussers are spoiled with an unsoiled royal box. Minus listeners get defective disposal receptacles for medical needles. Hey, catch! Patrons and plussers get dinosaur feathers encased in fossilized resin. Minus listeners get resin. Patrons and plussers own the trademark to the smell of fresh strawberries. Minusers have their likeness at the height of puberty carved in butter and placed on the buffet at Red Lobster. Patrons and plussers get sugar gliders that cling to their phalanges like mittens. What are you minusing for? You're a natural-born plusser. Click the link in the show notes and pop your opulent top. Spirituality and religion. I've misunderstood both of them, so I'm here now to help you overstand each of them. Maybe you're thinking of trading one for the other. The God is always greener on the other side, right? That depends on whether or not it's true. Personally, it's taken a lot of soul searching to become clear enough to not misconstrue my own confusion, and that's what I'm here to displain. Spirituality and religion. The left and right testicles of the holy scrotum. Reach between your metaphysical legs and fondle them. What's that? One of them has a cancerous nodule. Before you cut that nut, you'd better find out which is which and what is what. For instance, if it's from your culture, it's religious. If it's from some far-off culture in a distant land, it's spiritual. Prayer is religious, but Tibetan prayer flags are spiritual. I mean, just look at those things. Prayer flags are handcrafted by poor people in a third world country. They're written in some ancient language I have no idea what it means, which means it's incredibly profound. Why else would God put it in a different tongue? And it's not just objects that are either spiritual or religious, but situations too. Like singing hymns in church is religious, but doing shrooms in an ashram is spiritual. Some things just need a little tweak in order to become spiritual. Hand job in a massage parlor, sinful. While burning incense, spiritual. That's because sex is a religious taboo, but sensuality is a spiritual toboggan. Climb on and speed down the lubed-up slopes of human anatomy. Whee! Listen, man, if there's one thing I've learned from spiritual teachers, it's that I don't have to learn anything religious. I have to unlearn religious conditioning. I'm already spirit, I just gotta stop not experiencing it. Just witness your breathing. Say you're robbing a bank. Just follow your breath with your awareness, and you'll notice that the self is an illusion. So you're not committing an armed robbery. One is just arising in the moment. You start doing these little practices and you're going to be so fucking spiritual. Like even that, when a religious person says fuck, they're cursing. When I say it, I'm evolving because I've unlearned that word. To me, that signifier could signify anything. When I say fuck, I'm signifying love because I fuck you, but also, I mean vaginal penetration. This is semantics, by the way, and it's the ejection seat of religious arguments. Telling religion and spirituality apart is not rocket science. Everything is spirit, so anything can be spiritual, except rocket science, because that's weaponry and wars are religious. Mark my words, one day spirituality will wipe the violent religions off the face of this earth. Why? Because religion is full of sex abuse and hoarding money and making people conform. And spirituality is about abusing sex and losing money and making people confused. It's simplicated. Religion is polyester, spirituality is silk. Mormon underwear is religious, edible underwear is spiritual when Gwyneth Paltrow wears it. Religious figures get charged for having sex with their students, and spiritual figures charge their students for sex. Don't get me wrong, okay? Religion and spirituality are not always exclusive. Some religious people are spiritual too. They're called heretics. In the words of one of my favorite heretics, Zen Master Ikkyu, quote, "Her mouth played with my cock the way the clouds play with the sky," end quote. That's how a religious nut has a spiritual awakening.
That's true.
To book one-on-one sessions with me, Stuart Davis, click the link in the show notes. Sessions include anomalous experiences, past life regression, and creativity as a spiritual path. And check out the Experiencer Group, a private membership site for experiencers of phenomena from mediumship, precognition, contact with non-human entities, and much more. TheExperiencerGroup.com or click the link in the show notes.
and spires and catacombs. No labyrinth will lead us home. One man's candle, next man's pyre. Take discomfort, it's all on fire. Lamps unto ourselves. Black star passing overhead, wicks the shadow under bed. One iris that fills the sky. One witness drops at night. One man's candle, next man's pyre. Take discomfort, it's all on fire. Lamps unto ourselves. Crossing over, there's no divide, no other or other side.